Racing Magazine is sponsored by Alba Automotive. The first of the twin 20-lap features for the modifieds saw Jean Larocque of Hawkesbury, Ontario in the 217 command the pole with Cornwall's Roger Lalonde to the outside of the front row in his number 9 machine. As the field raced through the front straightaway, Lalonde got shunted high to the outside and lost a lot of ground in the very first turn.
Pat O'Brien, who had lined up right behind pole sitter Larocque on the started grid, shot past him on the inside and gained the lead before the first lap had been completed. It would prove to be the only pass, except for lap traffic, that O'Brien would require.
The first yellow was thrown for Cornwall veteran Carl Murdoch, who experienced engine problems with 6 laps in the books and was done for the evening.
O'Brien in the Stan's Auto Body Special number 1 car was joined by Larocque in the front row for this lap 7 restart. But quickly charging into the picture was Dave Hayslip of Smith Falls, Ontario. He was coming off a second-place showing the previous night at Can-Am Speedway in Lafargeville, New York.
Now, Hayslip's pursuit of O'Brien was temporarily aborted when a second caution flag flew 1 lap later for Kevin Federley. The driver from Messina, New York, in the 57C car had spun out in turn 1. He was able to continue.
Camara, in his number 26 ride out of Pulteney, Vermont, looked to move up from 6th place with a dozen laps to go. But he found himself surrounded by some excellent talent. Cornwall's Marcel the Hammer LaFrance was a roadblock in front with his number 15 machine, while the chase vehicle in behind belonged to Kingston's Doug Carlisle in the number 11.
O'Brien continued to churn off the laps as the leader. He had come to Cornwall this night trying to salvage a little success from the weekend. On Friday night, he had driven the Sheldon Legui Racing Team Big Block Modified to a 9th place finish in Granby, Quebec. And the night before had been knocked out of the feature race at Frogtown International Speedway near Hogansburg, New York by a first lap accident. But it was clear sailing for O'Brien with the final 13 laps run off consecutively under green conditions. Chasing O'Brien to the finish line were Hayslip in the number 84 and Laurent Ladisser in the 23. Now the victory lane thoughts of feature winner Pat O'Brien.
First checkers of the season, the modified division. The last 13 laps consecutively under green, Pat. Tell us how you saw it from behind the wheel of the number 1.
Well, whenever you're leading, especially at Cornwall, it's nice to keep as much green flag racing as you can, so I didn't mind to see that.
Now, you had quite a lead. I know you don't have a rear view mirror. You had quite a lead, and then you got into the lap traffic, and that allowed Dave Hayslip and Laurent Ladisser to close pretty quickly. You can hear those guys, huh?
Yeah, I figured they were close. You know, I didn't know how close they were when I caught the lap traffic. I knew they were close. I could have maybe went around them on the outside, but at Cornwall, it's pretty tough to give up the inside lane no matter what kind of racing you're into.
Yeah, very early in the season, and this track like glass here tonight, it seems. Is it more than 1 lane?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't have to race too hard starting up at the front, but it seems like it's real heavy, and Cornwall can sometimes be hard to pass when it's like that because the inside lane's so fast, but we'll see what happens in the second race. We got to come from the back.
The final finishing order was reversed to determine the starting lineup for the second end of the Twin 20s. That meant that defending track champion Rick Wilson, who had dropped out of the first feature with oil pressure problems, started on the pole.
The rest of the drivers knew that Wilson would be awfully difficult to beat. He had the double-edged advantage of a great starting position, along with the shorter distance of 20 laps compared to the usual 30 laps.
O'Brien had aspirations of pulling off a Twin 20 sweep. The crowd knew it wasn't impossible. O'Brien's second-generation racing skills, coupled with the perfectionist preparation of the Legui race team, make him a contender in every race he enters.
The field slowed for the only caution of the race with 8 laps completed. Pierre Dagenet, who is the owner and promoter of Idlewild Speedway on the dirt circuit, was having problems aboard his 124.
Although they didn't know it at the time, this proved to be the only shot the competition got at Wilson on a restart. But the 24K pilot out of Joyceville, Ontario, is renowned for always having plenty of power under the hood. He had no problem pulling away and re-establishing his lead.
But Wilson wasn't about to run away and hide because Ladisser in the 23 and Hayslip in the number 84 took off right with him. But Ladisser needed Wilson to make a huge mistake if he was going to get by, and that glaring error was simply not forthcoming. The defending Cornwall track champion brought his ride in for the checkers, and his fourth feature victory of the weekend. 1992 was off to a great start for Rick Wilson at Cornwall Motor Speedway.
And Rick, first off, tell us the problems at the end of the first feature that allowed you to start up front in feature number 2. What'd you have to fix?
Well, in the first, I went out in the hot laps there, and the oil temperature was going right sky high. So I went in, I come back out in the first feature there, and I only got a few laps in, and the oil temperature was like 325, so I just pulled in. I didn't have enough time to change the oil before the feature, but I took enough time that time to get the oil changed because I had the wrong oil in the thing. I didn't have synthetic oil in it. So that was that.
So that's the place to start, right up front, when you have the kind of power that you do, and a feature race is only 20 laps, huh?
Makes it a lot tougher, yeah. If you're starting at the back here, it's tough.
This has been a great weekend for you. 4 feature victories on the first full weekend of racing. That's something else.
That's a real good way to start, yeah.
The lad in the number 99 ride received an excellent starting position on the outside of the front row for the first regular Sunday night feature race of 30 laps instead of 25, which had been customary for years. The lad stayed high throughout the first lap, and the next time around, heading through the corners, he shot past pole-sitting rookie Bill Mullen of Morrisburg, Ontario, and into the lead.
Kingston's Doug Carlisle in the number 11 was trying to rebound strongly after a mediocre opening week performance that left him in 9th place in the track standings after 2 feature races. Nicknamed the Ox, Carlisle is one of the most skillful drivers on the dirt circuit and is shown here working to the inside of the number 9 of Roger Lalonde.
Another strong contender week in and week out is Kingstonian Pat O'Brien in the number 1 machine. The Cornwall handicapping system makes the drivers occupying the loftier positions in track standings start near the back come feature time. And O'Brien is simply one of the best there is at taking to the high side and battling his way up through traffic.
Pole sitter Mullen got into trouble here on lap 6. Mullen is an excellent all-around athlete who's also proficient as a fastball pitcher in a hockey arena and at the golf course. He's definitely a young man who will be heard from in the modified ranks, but this night ended early.
And this lap 6 restart indicated the strategy that Ron Valad would employ to try and protect his position as the front runner. He was going to stay tight to the inside and let the rest of the field jockey for position in behind him.
There were plenty of drivers willing to move up and mount a challenge at Valad. Lauren Lattiser, the laser out of Alexandria, took an aggressive posture and attacked the line of cars in front of him, one at a time.
Pat O'Brien's luck went bad on lap 13 when he snapped a radius rod that controls the steering to the right front part of his car. This close-up from our trackside camera shows the mud that splatters on the drivers as they race around the Cornwall quarter mile. The reason O'Brien's face remains clean is that drivers use plastic tear-offs in that area. When the one on top gets dirty, it is ripped off to expose a fresh surface. Depending upon conditions, a driver might go through 10 or 15 tear-offs in a feature race.
Pierre Dagenat in the 124 lined up alongside Ron Valad for this lap 13 restart. He quickly found out about the risks involved in staying high to get a shot at the leader. Dagenat, a sophomore modified pilot, who also owns the Idlewild dirt track in Wilson Corners, Quebec, went from 2nd to 7th place here in 1 revolution of the Speedway.
Lattiser, in the number 23, continued to charge through the field toward the front and was aided here by some handling problems experienced by Roger Lalonde in the number 9 car.
During the same caution flag, the 4th of 6 in the race, Randy Connors of Hogansburg, New York, and defending track champion Rick Wilson of Joyceville, Ontario, became involved in a heated exchange. Connors, the driver of the 120, was bumped off the track and came to a skidding halt on the infield grass just off the front straightaway. He complained bitterly to flagman Rick Fontaine, who informed him his best move would be to return to his race car and prepare to fire up again if that was possible. When Wilson brought his 24K around for a chat with the starter, he was told he was being sent to the rear of the field for rough riding tactics.
Ford had been dominating the NASCAR circuit, and it was the Ford-powered Chico Dingwall of Prescott, Ontario, who got set to start right beside Ron Valad heading into lap number 20. A rule change introduced this season in Cornwall has the field line up in double file formation for all restarts, even the ones after the halfway point of the feature. This new format is designed to make the race even more exciting for the fans, and it has also reduced the mishaps on restarts in turn number 1, a traditional burying ground for wrecks at Cornwall Motor Speedway.
Vlad got a little wobbly at times and made a mistake here, but nobody was behind him able to capitalize. For the most part, the traffic was rather congested immediately behind the leader, as Marcel Lafrance found out in his number 15.
After one more caution for the 007 of American Roy Tarbell, the Laser, Laurent Ladouceur, was zeroed in on the leader. Ron Vlad, who was seeking his first Cornwall Motor Speedway feature victory in 5 years of modified racing, would be put to a stress-filled test with 1/3 of the race still to go.
Billy Cook in his M70 from Hogansburg, New York, got crossed up with Marcel Lafrance down the back chute with 24 laps completed, giving the competition at least one more shot at Vlad. Remember, if this had been last season, the checkered flag would have come out on the next lap, number 25. But after 24 laps in a 1992 feature, there were still 6 to go.
Vlad never wavered from the strategy he committed himself to way back in the early part of the race. If Ladouceur was going to pass him, it would have to be to the outside. But the Laser found conditions a little dicey when he checked them out up top.
Eventually, Vlad pulled away as Ladouceur had to concern himself more with protecting second spot from Doug Carlisle and Dave Hayslip rather than overhauling the number 99. The top 5 finished behind Vlad went as follows: Ladouceur, Carlisle, the 84 of Dave Hayslip of Smith Falls, and Cornwall's Pierre Bissonnette in the number 7. It was a rather exuberant Vlad who chatted with Fred in the winner's circle.
The wait was worth it, was it?
It was. Jesus, I've been waiting for that one since a long time. I'd like to thank everybody that helped me in the pit crews and the sponsors and all that, but it's fun.
The last time you won a feature here in Cornwall was in another division.
Yeah, in semi-pro, yeah. That was the last time we won a feature. So it feels good after 5 years.
A field of 23 cars lined up to contest the modified feature race over 30 laps, with Billings on the outside of the front row, alongside pole sitter Bill Mullen of Morrisburg, Ontario. Under Cornwall's handicapping system, the cars lower in the track standing start at the front come feature time. In the case of a rookie driver, such as Mullen in the 22, it can provide some valuable experience running at the front of the pack.
The first of 6 cautions was thrown with 5 laps in for Neil Harvey of Saranac Lake, New York. While he was waiting for assistance, Dave Hayslip rolled onto the scene. The veteran driver from Smith Falls, Ontario, came into the evening in 2nd place in the track standings. But the steering problems that put him up on the hook caused him to drop off the pace considerably, both in this race and the standings.
Mullen successfully protected his lead off this lap 6 restart. Meantime, number 99 Ron Vlad, the outlaw from Glen Robertson, Ontario, shot up quickly with all barrels blazing, looking for racing room. He had won the last feature at Cornwall and seemed to be driving with renewed confidence.
Another weekly contender is Rick Wilson, the driver of the 24K from Joyceville, Ontario, near Kingston. Wilson, honored as the Dirt Driver of the Week for the way he's been tearing up the circuit since mid-May, was charging full throttle up from the rear. Everybody had to hit the brakes, though, when Vlad's flat forced a second yellow with 9 laps completed.
Randy Connors in the 120 from Hogansburg, New York, was the next frontrunner in the race. He battled side by side with Pierre Dagenet of Gatineau, Quebec in the 124. Mullen, meantime, was trying to hang tough in 3rd spot. But when Connors darted back down between the corners to get to the inside groove again, he tapped Mullen. The number 22 spun out, and everybody was looking to bail out safely between the corners.
Dagenet established himself as the leader on the next restart, gunning ahead of Connors and pulling away a bit from his pursuers. Dave Camara chased him in the number 26, while Connors, still running the high side, gets in trouble heading into turn 3. This spectacular flip on lap 13 was the first of 3 of its kind on the night. But while the 1992 Troyer chassis was shaken, rattled, and rolled, the safety gear kept Randy Connors in one piece. He was shaken up, obviously, and was checked out for a bruised knee, but served as another example of how well constructed these modified cars are, with driver safety being of paramount importance.
Next, we shift to a lap number 20 restart, with Dagenet trying to fend off the challenge posed by Laurent Ladouceur of Alexandria in the 23. Nicknamed the Laser, Lattiser had performed some laser surgery on the field, moving up from dead last on the starting grid to second spot in the space of 19 laps. The 1990 Cornwall track champion, Lattiser, showcased his superior torque and shot past Dagenet into the lead.
There was a sixth and final yellow when Hawkesbury's Jean Larocque experienced problems aboard the 217. Double file formation is standard procedure for all restarts in Cornwall this year, so that gave Dave Camara a shot at Lattiser from the outside of the front row.
But you can see Lattiser coyly drift slightly to the outside, coming down the front straight and approaching the flag stand where racing begins. That shunted Camara to the upper groove, and he was forced to settle for chasing Lattiser the rest of the way. Behind runner-up Camara, the top 5 finishers were Dagenet, Wilson, and Pat O'Brien of Kingston. In the winner's circle, Lattiser dedicated the checkered flag to his 14-year-old son Lee, who's hospitalized with severe leg burns following a garage mishap a couple of weeks ago. In the winner's circle with Laurent Lattiser. And Laurent, first of all, I guess there's not much question who this victory is dedicated to, huh?
That's for sure. My son all the way.
Tell us about the circumstances involving your young boy.
Oh, he spilled some gas on him at home and on his legs, and it lit up, and both legs were severely burnt.
So he's in Chio for about 6 weeks or so, so this race dedicated to him. Tell us about winning it behind the wheel. You're the points leader. You came in without a feature victory, but you had to come right from the back.
Yeah, and we weren't able to sneak out on this one. Sometimes the guys aren't ready, and we gain a couple of positions on the track, but it didn't work out tonight. We had to start dead last, and I didn't think it was going to go up that fast, but the track was smooth and nice, and you could run the outside, and that's what helped.
Feature time with a full moon rising in the sky just a few hours before a lunar eclipse occurred found the appropriately named Bill Moon Mullen holding down pole position with Kevin Federley of Messina, New York to the outside in the 57C. Federley gained the early advantage from the high side of the track, and he and Mullen would take turns at the front of the 24-car pack for the first 23 laps of this 30-lap feature.
But, as is usually the case, the best racing was taking place well back down the line. Rick Wilson, coming off a 50-lap victory on Friday at Idlewild Speedway in Wilson Corners, Quebec, was trying to make up ground quickly from his 16th starting position. The methodical, high-horsepower tour through the competition was temporarily derailed when Wilson bumped with the number 7 of Cornwall's Pierre Bissonnette on lap 4. A 15-pound chunk of clay found its way into Wilson's cockpit and landed on the gas pedal. He fought to keep his ride under control before finally stopping and removing this unwanted guest from the undercarriage. Wilson knew he had to go to the rear of the field, and the crowd knew he wouldn't stay there for long.
Rick Wilson had worked himself up into 12th spot by the time the second of 8 caution flags flew, with 10 laps completed for Denzel Billings of Merrickville, Ontario. This was also the cue for Cornwall points leader Laurent Lattiser in the 23 to make a pit stop for some fresh rubber on the left rear side. Lattiser always has plenty of help at the racetrack, and this night was no exception, as a small army of 7 crew members descended upon his number 23 to get him back out with laser-like efficiency without missing a lap.
Wilson resumed his rambunctious trip to the front when the green flag flew again. First, he traded a little paint with the 19A of Dennis Larocque from Mecham, Quebec, and at the very same spot the next time around the quarter mile, Wilson continued to display his gopher broke driving style that he sums up by saying, "I don't race for second place." There was some more roughhousing with Brian Hearn of Hogansburg, New York in the number 27, and eventually the 2 laps of bumper car racing came to a fitting conclusion when Wilson tangled in his favorite spot, turn 3, with Pierre Bissonnette. Once again, the Joyceville Jet had to cool his engine at the rear of the field.
Meantime, at the front, leader Kevin Federley, as is his option, continued to choose to start from the outside of the front row. They ran this way for 20 laps and through 6 restarts before Federley experienced some problems, got shunted to the outside, and eventually faded from the top 10 finishers.
Another strong contender, Kingston's Carlisle in the number 11, was running among the first half-dozen racers when he became involved in a turn 2 jingle and was spun around. This all happened with 25 laps in the books and meant that on the next restart, Bill Mullen would be surrounded by 7 drivers sitting in the top 10 in modified points. Undaunted, Mullen held his line, steered a course around the shortest part of the track, and let the heavy hitters jockey for position in behind him. Mullen appeared to be on his way to his first dirt victory until yellow was unfurled again for Cornwall's Marcel Lafrance, who rolled to a pulse-quickening stop down the back straight.
Moon Mullen is what you would call a natural athlete. He's an outstanding softball pitcher, a crafty sniper on the hockey rink, and more than holds his own in the golf links. A cool customer, he most definitely is not your typically panicky modified rookie. And if Wilson was going to beat Mullen, it was going to have to be with superior machinery and not through driver error. That's exactly what happened as the 24K eclipsed the Moon Man's number 22 around the corners on the lap 29 restart and raced away to the checkers down the backstretch. Rick Wilson had gone from last to first twice on his way to becoming the first repeat modified feature winner of the season in Cornwall. Bill Mullen had to settle for being the runner-up, still his best ever finish, with Jean Larocque, Dave Camara, and Dave Hayslip rounding out the top 5. Rick, that wasn't the easiest victory I've seen you take here.
That was probably about the roughest one I've been in down here in a while, yeah.
What, just one of those nights or what?
Well, as you can see at the start there, when your guys are getting all over the place in front of you there, you can be a victim of circumstances, like I was like 3 times. And, you know, that happens. This is Cornwall.
Rockin' Randy Connors in the 120 started on the pole and refused to let anyone get past in the early going. Nearly 10,000 horsepower continued to thunder around the Cornwall clay. Bill Mullen in the number 22 was looking to recapture the magic of his second-place feature finish 2 weeks earlier, but the rookie's car had been in the garage all weekend long and still was not 100%.
The action continued non-stop for 20 consecutive laps before the first yellow was unfurled for Ron Valad in the number 99. His pyrotechnics display was unscheduled as flames shot from the exhaust pipes. As the 99 cooled off, the four-wheeler arrived on the scene to escort him to the pit.
As usual, starter Rick Fontaine was right on top of the action for the restart. Connors held the lead again and was pursued by Kevin Federley of Messina, New York, who was coming off the first modified victory of his career the previous night at Frogtown Speedway in the 57C.
Doug Carlisle can usually be counted on to be part of the pack that quickly moves to the front. But the former Mr. Dirt champion, who now races for the Dale Bollier team, encountered mechanical problems here on lap 27. There would be no threat from the Ox this year in the Summer Nationals.
Connors had the 124 of Gatineau, Quebec's Pierre Dagenet and the 15 of Cornwall's Marcel Lafrance, knocking on his back bumper on the next restart. Those 3 cars pulled away and left Federley in the 57C to joust with Ovid Dworon's number 40 for 4th place. While Federley had been soaking up the success of his victory the night before, Dworon had headed home to the garage and been up until 3:30 in the morning working to restore a crumpled shot tower to racing form. Son Joel took up the job at 6 o'clock in the morning to get his 51-year-old father ready to go racing about 12 hours later.
The third caution of the race was thrown for Hawkesbury's Jean Larocque. Connors lined up this time to try and fend off a group of heavy hitters that included Laurent Ladisser, Marcel Lafrance, Dworon, and Dagenet. Ladisser spotted the opening that presented itself when Connors took the middle ground into the corners, and Dagenet in the 124 followed the Connors lead. While Connors had let off just for a second to stay in control, the Lasers stayed on the gas all the way around and had the lead when the front runners headed for the front stretch.
Laser Ladisser was leading handily and seemingly headed for the checkers when he met a most unfortunate fate in the form of a lap car. The number 17 of Denzel Billings loomed in front of Ladisser as he came around for the white flag lap. Billings, experiencing engine problems and a loss of power, held tight to the inside instead of moving to the outside as lap traffic is supposed to in Cornwall. Just as Ladisser realized he had to get outside and crank the wheel hard right, Billings slowed up even more, and Ladisser plowed into the back of him.
Watching the replay, you can see Ladisser make a quick decision to take a shortcut through the infield, and this proved most unlucky for Pierre Dagenet, because when Ladisser came off the bank and back onto the track, he fell right into line ahead of Dagenet, who was going much faster. There was an inevitable collision, and with 1 lap to go, both Ladisser and Dagenet sat helplessly in turn 2. Ladisser argued, unsuccessfully, that he should get his spot back.
There's no substitute for experience, as the saying goes, And the drivers now sitting in positions 1, 2, and 3 owned better than 75 years of racing experience among them. Dworon, 33 years, was in the lead. Beside him in the 84 was Dave Hayslip, who's heading for 30 years racing. And behind Dworon sat the 15 of Marcel Lafrance in his 22nd season. The Flying Frenchman was not about to let this one slip away. Ovid Dworon outran Hayslip in their one-lap dash to the checkers. Dworon stated before the season he was only going to run special shows in Cornwall, and the first one he attended proved to be very special indeed for him.
Ovid, I don't know how many times I've talked to you after a race and things didn't go right for you. You just looked and said, well, that's racing. Tonight, you can say that's racing and say it with a big smile on your face.
Yeah, that was racing, but I got ahead of the game for once.
Your first trip here to Cornwall, I guess just like driving a bicycle, you never forget this track. You know it well.
This track was really super nice tonight. We had a good bunch to race with. I never touched anybody, and I'm glad.
Feature time found the 68 of Peter Manta of Gatineau, Quebec, holding down the pole position. Getting the jump on the 17 of Denzel Billings of Merrickville, Ontario, Manta found out what it was like to be running in the spot that all 23 other drivers on the track were gunning for. Many fans in the crowd, and especially the ladies, naturally kept their eyes trained on the red 77 of Tammy Willard. Other drivers maybe had more horsepower, but Tammy quickly earned the respect of knowledgeable race fans with her smooth, steady style. It was obvious she knew what she was doing on the track, which shouldn't be that surprising, considering the young lady finished 8th in the points last year at Ransomville Speedway, just outside of Buffalo. It's a track where the competition includes Pete Bicknell, the Johnson brothers, and legendary barefoot Bob McCready.
Another driver on the move was second heat winner Dagenet. He had lined up in the number 8 starting slot, but had gained a lot of ground by the time the leader ran into trouble.
Kevin Federley of Messina, New York, saw it early from behind the wheel of his number 57 and was able to bail out to the high side. Down the back straight, Manta and Billings had become entangled and spun, duet style, up onto the infield grass. Young Peter Manta's ride at the front of the pack was over, and he had time to think about it as the safety crews went about their work.
Manta's demise meant the number 27 of Brian Hearn now rolled into the picture as the new leader. But before the green flag was waved again, starter Rick Fontaine had to get stern with one of the competitors. It seems they all take turns being testy and testing the judgment of race officials throughout the season. In this case, it was Dave Camara of Poultney, Vermont, who was threatened by Fontaine with the black flag before he fell into line.
The lap 12 restart proved rather eventful. First, it was Dagenet's 124 beating Hearn's 27 to corner 1 and shooting across quickly to take command of the lead. Tammy Willard got shunted to the outside and lost a lot of ground, as did Dave Hayslip of Smith Falls, Ontario, who wound up with his number 84 on the grass.
But their problems could be forgotten over the remaining 18 laps. Not so for Cornwall's Pierre Bissonnette, whose front suspension had completely collapsed. It was out of the car and up on the hook for Pistol Pete, who still managed to stay in the top 10 in the track standings, despite being the first casualty of this 30-lap feature.
Dagenet would say later that he was on the gas, full bore around the entire racetrack. He proves it here as he roars away from Hearn and the rest of the field on a lap 13 restart.
Marcel the Hammer Lafrance of Cornwall was busily pounding on the competition. Marcel is one of those guys who, if his engine isn't quite right on the money, can compensate with experience. He has over 20 years of it.
Aggressive driving is Rick Wilson's trademark, but here the Racing Magazine camera catches the defending Cornwall track champion in the act of some questionable sportsmanship by driving from the top side to the low groove right into the side of Camara. The flagrant foul did not go undetected, and Wilson received a warning the next time he passed the flag stand.
Doug Carlisle had his number 11 working hard to the inside against the M70 of Bill Cook, who's from Hogansburg, New York. Carlisle can be counted on to win at least one feature at Cornwall Motor Speedway every season, but in 1992, it was not going to happen on this night.
Jean Larocque of Hawkesbury in the number 217 and Cornwall's Lafrance battled it out for third spot in behind Dagenet and Hearn. Lafrance would hold the upper hand for now, but it wouldn't remain that way when the checkers finally came out.
Rick Wilson found the passing lane pretty congested. He would wind up 8th in the feature, right behind Alexandria's Laurent Ladisser, the guy Wilson is chasing for the modified points lead.
But all that other maneuvering was occurring well behind the 124 of Dagenet. The first career victory for the 39-year-old real estate developer was a convincing one. And as they say, it's that first one that you always remember.
Pierre, first modified feature victory. How does it feel?
Nervous.
You've never had to stand here before, but I imagine you want to stand here a few more times.
Oh yeah, every week.
Now, you had almost a quarter of a track lead. It was just your car that much faster than everybody else tonight?
No, it was hooked up good, very good. We adjusted a few things before the race. We went in a warm-up and we find the good things.
Feature time saw rookie Mullins share the front row with Denzel Billings of Merrickville, Ontario. A veteran campaigner who was a champion racer in his prime, Billings showed he still has a little left of the old touch and took the lead on the first lap. The first yellow was also thrown on lap 1 when Dave Hayslip got into the side of Jean Larocque's 217. Both men know when to back off the accelerator, and there was no serious damage.
Moon Mullen zipped past Billings on the restart. Just 8 hours earlier, Mullen had been king of the hill, pitching in a fastball tournament. For the time being, he was now king of the road at Cornwall Motor Speedway.
Two intense, fiery individuals came together for the second caution of the event with 4 laps completed. Defending track champion Rick Wilson in the 24K from Joyceville, Ontario, and Cornwall's LaFrance aboard the 15 wind up just a few feet apart between corners 1 and 2.
Figuring the mishap was the fault of Wilson, LaFrance expresses his feelings by ever so gently nudging into the 24K. Feeling the slight and taking it personally, Wilson hops out of his car and wants to talk about it. But the Hammer was employing hit-and-run tactics only, and if this confrontation was going to continue, it would have to be later in the race.
LaFrance received a warning at the flag stand for his behavior and an icy stare from Wilson the next time he ventured past the still stopped 24K. Although we don't quite see it here, Wilson had a right side tire roll off his car while he headed to the pits in an agitated fashion.
It seemed many drivers sensed early on that this race was going to be wide open, there for the taking, and the favorites would fail to dominate. The group of 4, led by Mullen, and including Pierre Bissonnette in the number 7, Roy Tarbell in the 007, and Brian Hearn in the 27, were all looking for their first career dirt-modified victory.
Hearn, out of Hogansburg, New York, knew his visit to victory lane would have to wait once he got into the side of the red number 26 of Dave Camara, who hails from Poultney, Vermont. This transpired with 12 laps completed.
No question, Bill Mullen is going to be an excellent racer. Instinctively, he makes all the right moves. However, what he lacks right now is the kind of horsepower that's required in a situation like this. The new leader, then, is Cornwall resident Pierre Bissonnette, who finds lap number 13 to be anything but unlucky. Quickly, this becomes a battle of the Pierres, as Pierre Dagenet blazes forward to take a run at Bissonnette. Dagenet, who seems to improve every time out, had captured his first career victory at Cornwall earlier in the month. It was a 2-car race now between the 7 and 124 for 7 laps before Tom Jock Jr. got his number 31 out of shape heading into turn 4. Yellow came out for a 4th time.
Bissonnette got another great jump on the next restart. Suddenly, down the back straight, Dagenet lost power, was passed by Ron Valade, and then hit by Laurent Ladisser, who lost his right rear tire. A frustrated Cornwall Speedway modified points leader was left spinning his wheels helplessly just outside pit row. Dagenet, meantime, realized he needed some attention from his crew, too.
Restart time again, and as Bissonnette pulls away, attention focuses on the race for second. Valade escapes, while 3 cars pile up behind him in turn number 4. It took the tow truck crews a few minutes to disentangle this logjam created by Tarbell, LaFrance, and the late arriving Dave Camara. When they did, there were 7 laps remaining, and rejoining the field to run them was Rick Wilson.
But this race belonged to Pierre Bissonnette, and he simply pulled away to win by a quarter of a track. Ron Valad of Glen Robertson, Ontario was the runner-up, with Dave Hayslip of Smith Falls, Jean Larocque of Hawkesbury, Ontario, and American Leon Gagnon from Chazy, New York, rounding out the top 5. It was quite a happy gang that converged on Victory Lane to help Pierre Bissonnette celebrate that breakthrough victory.
Pierre, for an opening comment, I guess good things happen to those who wait, huh?
Oh, it's great. I tell you, you can really feel those guys behind you, and the jitters are there, boy. But it's great to win that first one. I'm so happy. Thanks.
Neil Harvey started on the pole, but yellow came out quickly, owing to a track that was still pretty slick. Leon Gagnon in the number 4, Morrisburg, Ontario's Bill Mullen in the 22, and Cornwall's Pierre Bissonnette in the number 7 got together for the first of 8 cautions over the next 30 laps.
Harvey, out of Saranac Lake, New York in the 44K, got another chance to set the pace. But on the restart, he drifts high, and Roger Lalonde in the number 14 comes shooting through to grab the lead.
However, Lalonde surrendered the lead, and Pierre Dagenais from Gatineau, Quebec, took over in the 124. Dagenais, in his second year on the dirt circuit, had won earlier in the season at Cornwall under nearly identical track conditions. Slippery in the early going, but stopped dead tacky midway through the race once the wide modified tires had a chance to work things in.
Rockville's Bill Busby, in his first night out in the modified ranks, had his hands full early on, trying to hold off Rick Wilson of Joyceville, Ontario, for position. Busby, who had blown his engine after some solid early season showings in the sportsman division, had decided to step up his program just a bit and race in the top class with his number 89.
Denzel Billings of Merrickville, Ontario, forced the 4th restart of the race with 5 laps in when he spun off turn 3. Roger Lalonde took advantage of the situation and pulled past Dagenais and back into the front runner's position. Lalonde was driving the number 14 car, originally purchased by the Jim Butler racing team for Cornwall driver Brian Dunsmore. But in a story with a tragic twist, Dunsmore is paralyzed from the waist down following a work-related accident that happened just before the car was ready to be raced.
Meantime, as usual, the heavy hitters were slowly filtering to the top. Doug Carlisle out of Kingston at the number 11. Alexandria, Ontario's Laurent Ladisser, the number 23. And Joyceville's Rick Wilson in the 24K own 5 Cornwall track titles among them. Here they work the Cornwall quarter mile together like a high-horse-powered gang, ready to pounce upon and pass anybody who fails to meet their fast standards.
Roger Lalonde continued to set the pace at the front and would hold the lead for 17 laps. Marcel Lafrance and Pierre Dagenais staged a good battle for second spot in behind Lalonde until they came together with 16 laps in the books. Dagenais spotted an opening coming out of turn 4 and went for it. However, the traction wasn't quite what he was expecting, and his 124 ride wound up sliding across the track into the number 15, sending Lafrance slamming into the front wall. That shuffled the deck at the front, with Dave Camaro in the 26 and Doug Carlisle filling the spots vacated by Lafrance and Dagenais, who both headed for the pits.
Ron Cook in the number 66 makes the next restart a false one when he found the front wall. Lalonde showed he had what it took to fend off the 26 of Dave Camara. The next challenger arrived on the scene quickly as Rick Wilson roared past Camara and into second place. Wilson furiously applied the pressure on Lalonde until the turning point of the race, which occurred just as lap number 22 was punched up on the score clock.
Wilson had caught Lalonde and tried to zip past him on the inside, but they were racing a little too tightly, traded paint briefly, and had to let off the gas. That was all Dave Camara needed, as he made a picture-perfect pass on the outside and into the lead.
There was one more restart, and it proved to be a costly one for Roger Lalonde. With 24 laps completed, he was still running a solid second. But watch here as the number 14 goes from second to dead last when Lalonde gets shunted to the outside and caught up in the soft mud where solid footing is virtually non-existent.
There was one more pass of significance, with Laurent Ladisser getting his 23 around Wilson and into second spot with 3 laps to go. We'll see in just a few moments just how important the pass was when we check the point standings. But there would be nobody passing Dave Camara the rest of the way, and the young man from Pulteney, Vermont, had his first Cornwall feature victory of the season in the books. Lattiser and Wilson ran second and third respectively, with Doug Carlisle and Roy Tarbell in the 007 rounding out the top 5.
Dave, I guess in the early going, you had to be cautious. That track was still awfully slick, the moisture still just coming up out of it.
Yeah, the track didn't really come around until about the last 15 laps or so. It was pretty damp at first. We were just trying to take it easy and stay out of harm's way.
23 modified drivers tested their skills on the Cornwall quarter mile, with Harvey finding himself on the pole come feature time. And Neil showed the way when starter Rick Fontaine waved green to get the 30-lapper underway. He was pursued by Kevin Federley's 57C out of Messina and the 120 of Rocket Randy Connors from Hogansburg, New York.
All the horsepower thundered through turn 4 in front of the grandstand. And one of the guys showing real quick that he was real fast this night was Cornwall's Pierre Bissonnette in the number 7. He hit the brakes along with the rest of the field when Dave Camara in the 26 forced the first caution of the race with 5 laps completed. Rick Wilson, the defending Cornwall track champion from Joyceville, Ontario, hopped out to inspect his 24K. Although he found nothing wrong, this would prove to be an omen of things to come.
Harvey held his lead on the restart, but there was a tightly knit group that formed behind him. And another group of 6 cars got together in a turn 4 tangle that twisted a whole pile of sheet metal. But the only casualty was the 31 of Tom Jock Jr. of Hogansburg, New York. Tow truck operators had to gingerly swing his car around the stalled 24K of Wilson, who needed a push to get moving.
Both Harvey and Federley appeared to be having problems negotiating their way smoothly through the corners. But nobody could get a sustained run at them because of 4 yellows that came out in a span of as many laps. Here we see the aftermath of what happened when Steve Bilo rolled his number 20 up the front end of Jean Larocque's 217. As the video evidence shows, there was nowhere to go when Dave Camara's 26 happened quickly on the scene.
Pierre Bissonnette makes his moves on the next couple of laps. Pistol Pete shoots past the 57C into second for starters, and with all barrels blazing, sets his sights on the leader heading for lap 9. Harvey has to throw his 44K high into the corners or risk slowing down if he stays inside. But Bissonnette is able to slide full bore through the turns, and Pistol Pete empties all cylinders here to fire into the number 1 position.
Picking up the action behind him, we focus on the number 11 of Kingston's Doug Carlisle, an expert at steering clear of trouble, unless somebody gets sideways right in front of him, as Kevin Federley does here. When Marcel Lafrance arrives in the number 15, he actually straightens out Federley, and the 57C putts away. Carlisle is able to pull away, but a disheartened Cornwall veteran, Lafrance, sees his ride cradled off the track.
Bissonnette, clearly in command of the fastest car on the track now, pulls away on the restart. But it's a bumpy ride battling for position behind him. Rick Wilson gets out of control through turns 3 and 4, bouncing off the 22 of Mike Bruno from Fairhaven, Vermont, and right into the 57C of Federley. Love him or hate him, the fans always get their money's worth when Rick Wilson is on a track, and fellow competitors always know, too, just how he feels when something happens. Wilson, by the way, is the winningest driver in the North Country this season with 18 dirt victories to his credit.
With 20 laps in the books, Bissonnette leaves them racing for second place. The contenders are Harvey in the 44K, Ron Valade, the outlaw from Glen Robertson, Ontario in the 99, and American Leon Gagnon in the number 4 from Chazy, New York.
Having won the previous night at Frogtown International Speedway, just across the river from Cornwall near Hogansburg, New York, Bissonnette continues to pour it on, and in winning becomes the first driver this summer to pull off a Seaway Valley weekend modified sweep. Harvey hangs tough for second, with Valade, rookie Bill Busby from Brockville, Ontario, and Laurent Lattiser rounding out the top 5. Neil Harvey of Saranac Lake, New York, grabbed the early lead from the outside of the front row in the 44K. But he was quickly overtaken for the number 1 position on the very next lap by Rocket Randy Connors of Hogansburg, New York.
They would run the first 4 laps under green until heat winner Roger Lalonde was forced to shut down on the back straight with mechanical problems that sidelined him for the night. Also experiencing problems was Bill Mullen of Iroquois, Ontario in the number 22. Coming off his first career dirt victory on Friday at Idlewild Speedway in Wilson Corners, Quebec, Mullen is in a real battle in Cornwall with Roy Tarbell for top rookie honors.
Tarbell drives the James Bond-like 007 car. Lines up for this lap 6 restart behind pace setter Randy Connors in the number 120. The field has to let up for a costly yellow for Doug Carlisle, the Kingston, Ontario driver who came into the Sunday program tied for second in the modified point standings and snapped something in the front end.
Back to the action now on lap 10, and we pick up the trail being blazed by the current Dirt Driver of the Week, Pierre Bissonnette. It's always an honor, especially for a small block driver, to be recognized, and Pistol Pete, shown here in the Cornwall Oxygen number 7, was most appreciative. Bissonnette keeps Laurent Lattiser in the number 23 and Rick Wilson in the 27 at bay for another lap before caution comes out on the back straight.
During some very exciting restarts, rookie Tarbell had taken the lead away from Randy Connors. By the time Louis Peters of Akwesasne had something let go in the front end of his 85A, this with 13 laps completed. As one tow truck attaches the hook to Peters' ride, another one is giving Bill Mullins, number 22, similar treatment.
As Roy Tarbell protects his lead through 3 restarts, the yellows continue to mount. Rick Wilson, driving a cagey race, considering he goes to the pits 3 times over the course of 30 laps, is the reason for this caution right at the halfway point.
There's a close call here on turn 2 as Tarbell and Connors joust for the lead. Tarbell, starting from the high side, as is his option, gets to the corner first and dives inside. His back tire makes contact with Connors' front wheel, and the number 120 swerves hard right. Trying to keep things together down the back straight, it looks like Connors gets tagged again slightly from behind as he spins out of control and off the racing surface.
Rick Wilson, piloting the Pierre Manta number 27 ride, he had driven to victory the night before at Can-Am Speedway in Lafargeville, New York, appears to be firing on all cylinders again before he experiences more problems with 19 laps in the books. Coming back to place 7th was a real tribute to Wilson's perseverance and skill on this trying night.
Dave Camara had flashed past Tarbell for the lead at this point. The Poultney, Vermont driver was looking to make an appearance in victory lane for the 2nd time in 3 weeks. Bill Mullen, meantime, had made repairs and gotten back into the thick of things, while moments later, a couple of Quebec drivers, Denny Larocque in the 19A and Pierre Dagenet in the 124, became locked in one of those loveless embraces up and over the bank on turn number 2.
Camara had laser Lattiser on his back bumper for this lap 24 restart, but all eyes quickly shifted to turn 4, scene of a tangle involving the 44K of Neil Harvey and the 56A of Bill Woodward of Norwood, New York.
Dave Camara was trying to fend off a very aggressive Laurent Lattiser over the last half-dozen laps. The laser, in the number 23, seemed intent on racing him for the lead on about 3 of them, the first 3. But with 3 to go, Lattiser backed off somewhat to consolidate his hold on the runner-up position. And he waited in vain for Camara to make a mistake. And the Flash from Vermont was parking on the checkers again. Lattiser wound up 2nd, followed by Pierre Bissonnette, Marcel the Hammer LaFrance of Cornwall, and Roy Tarbell in the 007. Congratulations, Dave. Tell us how you did it.
Oh, I don't know. I guess we just got all the right brakes tonight.
It seemed to be a key on the restarts right in that first turn there. Roy Tarbell, he wanted to start up top when he was gunning against Randy Connors. Then when he went against you, he stayed to the inside. You were able to take advantage from your outside position. Was that the place to start from?
I don't know. It's tough on the outside here. You just gotta go into the first turn in the perfect line in order to come out ahead of the guy who's in first.
Feature time found the 17 of Denzel Billings from Merrickville, Ontario on the pole, joined by American Kevin Federley of Messina, New York in the 57C.
Federley quickly established himself as the front runner and had Lalonde in hot pursuit when they came out of turn 4 and headed for the flag stand to complete lap 1. Meantime, around mid-pack, a couple of guys were renewing acquaintances. Smith Falls' Dave Hayslip in the number 84 was racing side by side with big block driver Mark Hitchcock of Kingston, Ontario, who had jumped into Chico Dingwall's number 96 for the night. Both had to veer right to avoid rookie Bill Mullen of Iroquois, Ontario, who caused the first caution of the race when he got sideways between the corners with 5 laps in the books.
Roger Lalonde would say later he didn't have the horsepower that others did, but try telling that to Kevin Federley right here. The number 9 pulls past the 57C and into the lead from the outside of the front row. From the grandstand, it was apparent that Dave Camara's shiny red number 26 was indeed the fastest car on the track. Appropriately nicknamed the Flash, the young man from Poultney, Vermont came into the night as one of just 3 drivers with a pair of Cornwall feature wins to their credit this year. Pierre Bissonnette and Rick Wilson of Joyceville, Ontario were the others, with racing enthusiasts Merv and Joan Winters promising a $325 bonus to the man with the best finish over 30 laps in this one.
Nearing the halfway point, it was rookie Tarbell applying the pressure on Lalonde with his 007. Tarbell, blessed with the best equipment money can buy, has been consistently finishing in the top 5 almost every night out, and he was knocking on the door again. Veteran Doug Carlisle of Kingston suffered mechanical failure with 16 laps in. Just 2 weeks ago, the Ox was tied for 2nd in the track standings, but lately, this has been an all too familiar sight for him and his many followers. He would not return, and his stock would plummet some more on the points parade.
Roger Lalonde again holds the lead off this restart, and the inexperience of Roy Tarbell is painfully obvious too. Kevin Federley, Ron Valad of Glen Robertson, Ontario in the 99, and Camara all stream past before Tarbell is able to drop his 007 back into line after getting caught taking up way too much track on the high side. Tarbell, though, didn't have time to catch his breath before he had the aggressive Rick Wilson all over his back bumper. Wilson, the defending track champion in the 27K, will work you over from every which angle. But give Tarbell full marks for regaining his composure here, because Wilson would not get by.
The next yellow, the 4th of just 5 in the feature, was thrown for the 17 of Billings with 20 laps down. On the restart, it was time for Roger Lalonde to be on the gas and away from the panic button, because he had Camara waiting for him to make a mistake. Camara roared into 2nd when Kevin Federley failed to close the door quickly enough. When they passed in front of the grandstand again, it was Wilson driving flat out on the high side, trying to wheel past both Valad and Tarbell and join the group that formed the front 5. Known as the Outlaw, Valad was quick enough to be winning the race for 3rd place, but Lalonde and Camara were pulling away ahead of him. Sometimes you have to cut corners when you want to get ahead. That was Camara's strategy here around the 4th turn. But both he and Lalonde hit the binders when the final caution flew. It came with 28 laps completed and set the stage for a dramatic finish.
The front row was in the hands of starter Rick Fontaine when they barreled out of turn 4, and Camara left little doubt as to who had the fastest car. Through the corners and down the back chute, he had Lalonde beaten. But then, heading into turn 3, perhaps the gods of racing intervened in Lalonde's favor with a slight push sending Camara out of line just for a split second. Camara would recover quickly and nicely to protect his hold on 2nd spot, but the unseen hand that had pushed Camara was also the one that boosted Roger Lalonde back into victory lane in Cornwall for the first time since opening night of last season. Roy Tarbell, Ron Valad, and Pierre Dagenet of Gatineau, Quebec rounded out the top 5, with a 6th place finish by Rick Wilson serving to make things very interesting once again in the track standings.
Well, you came out and won your heat tonight. You're the first driver in Cornwall this season to win 4 heats. You come right back. What turned it around for you in the feature?
Only because I started at the front. Usually the top runners win the heat, and they got to start from the back, makes it hard. I was fortunate to start 4th, and that's all they gave it to me, just lucky.
It was an All-American front row, with Rich Ricky's number 55 to the inside of Kevin Federley of Messina, New York in the 57C. Close to 10,000 horsepower thundered around the Cornwall quarter mile in pursuit of Ricky, and the first caution light flashed quickly when Roger Lalonde lost his right front wheel and got sideways between the corners. The mishap also gathered in the 7-11 of Can-Am Speedway track champion Jimmy Johnson Jr. and the number 60 of Nicky Lapp from Accord, New York.
It was stop and go to slow in the early going with 3 cautions over the first 3 laps. Here, the lone rookie in the Canadian Tire Classic field, Dale Eggleston of Philadelphia, New York, finds the front wall. Eggleston wouldn't be very happy finishing 23rd overall, but just qualifying for the feature in a quality field had been a major accomplishment for a first-year driver.
Dave Camara from Poultney, Vermont ignites 24 straight laps under green by firing past Ricky's number 55 and into the lead on this lap 4 restart. Known as the Flash, Camara had finished second in his heat to stay right with Lattiser and Wilson in the quest for the Cornwall track title. We've already documented Lattiser's problems, and Rick Wilson was experiencing some of his own. After his car was a scratch because of mechanical difficulties for the feature, Wilson had to borrow the 124 of non-qualifier Pierre Dagenet, and that meant that, like Lattiser, Rick Wilson had to start from the back of the pack. But Wilson got comfortable in a hurry behind the wheel of Dagenet's Troyer. Meantime, veteran Marcel Lafrance of Cornwall had to dive for cover in the high ground of the infield when things got a little dicey for him coming out of turn number 2.
The leaders, a red brigade of Dave Camara in the 26, Rich Ricky in the 55, and Kingston's Pat O'Brien in the 1, were into lap traffic at the halfway point of the race. Yellow came out for a 4th time with 27 laps completed, when Rick Wilson's aspirations of defending his track title came to a stuttering halt on the 3rd turn. An emotional competitor who cools off just as quickly as he heats up, Wilson was incensed with the driver of the HP2 machine, Jimmy Hauser Jr. of Blauvelt, New York. He shows his displeasure by throwing a couple of strikes at Hauser as the field comes around under caution. Wilson wasn't the only driver less than impressed at Hauser's roughhouse driving style, but for his actions, Speedway officials were forced to disqualify Rick Wilson from the feature.
Rich Ricky displayed great torque in the 55 to get the lead back from Camara on this lap 28 restart. Laser Lattiser, meantime, in the number 23 was running 7th. He knew he had to get a lot closer to Camara, or else the American would be celebrating the track championship when this race was over. But nobody was giving an inch on the racing surface, as Mark Hitchcock and the sliding number 99 Ron Valad discovered when they took a tour of the infield.
Camara attempts to execute an outside-inside move on Ricky on this lap 31 restart, but Ricky shuts the door. He's used to being tested, having finished second behind Brett Hearn and ahead of Danny Johnson this season in the small block class at Orange County Speedway.
As the laps reel off, Lattiser is stuck in 6th place. And with Camara running a steady second to Ricky, it looks as if the Cornwall Speedway track title is headed stateside for the first time. But it ain't over till it's over, as that sports philosopher Yogi Berra once noted, and the Canadian Tire Classic is a classic example. 4 caution flags with just 1 lap remaining made for a dramatically prolonged finish that gave 3 different drivers a shot at the leader from the outside of the front row. But the first 2 guys, Pat O'Brien and Dave Camara, both had their hopes deflated by flat tires. Here we see Camara fall behind because his soft tire can't grip the clay. And then behind the leaders, there's a 3-way pileup that sends the 22 of Mike Bruno of Fairhaven, Vermont, up and over on his roof. Tempers are frayed at this point, as we see Bruno vent his frustration at the 26X of Rick Richner from Niagara Falls, New York.
Dave Hayslip was next in line to take a run at Rich Ricky's number 55. But once again, there are problems in behind the front runners. This time, Dave Camara's luck runs out. Hoping for a miracle despite the flat tire, Camara instead finds the front wall. His valiant effort done, Camara takes the long walk back to the pits. He's dejected now, but nobody doubts that someday Camara will walk around the Cornwall Speedway as track champion.
This is the 4th and final lap 50 restart. Hayslip has his number 84 slightly ahead down the front straight, but that tremendous top-end torque of Ricky allows him to pull away once again, this time for the checkers. Moose Hunter Hayslip picked up the Syracuse qualifier spot for finishing second, but quickly turned it over to 3rd place finisher Tim Fuller of Edwards, New York. Laurent Lattiser regained the track championship he owned in 1990 by placing 4th, with Cornwall's Marcel the Hammer Lafrance rounding out the top 5.
Well, Rick, you saw me in the car. You said that was the longest last lap you've ever run. Tell us about it.
I tell you, I had a million things in my mind, and I don't know what was happening out there. The last laps was the longest I've ever led.
I guess this race was won on the restarts about midway through. What was your strategy against Dave Camara in the 26?
Well, he was tough, and once I got to get a wheel ahead of him, and the guy going in the first turn was in there first, was going to come out ahead.